What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of PetMed, where we are really close to approaching double digits in terms of episodes. So it's kind of exciting how we've made some good progress. But with the last video, I talked about a kind of change I was going to implement for these videos. A lot of this is going to be very trite repetition code-wise, and to spare y'all the headache of having to watch me redo kind of the same thing over and over, I'm going to show the fundamentals of getting something started, and then I'll make the additional code, after the video. So you can still follow along with the below GitHub link, and you can look at it commit by commit to see kind of what commit goes with what corresponding video, but you only have to watch like a fraction of the same repeat stuff. So in this video, I'm going to show you how we're going to get started with setting up API testing with Postman. And I'm not going to write all of my tests for the entire project now. That's going to be some kind of, incremental building, but we will look at getting it started. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. I've got PetMed here opened up, and I'm going to go ahead and update my shell real quick. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and install a dev dependency here, one called Newman. And Newman is something built by the Postman team. It is a command line runner for Postman collections. So we're adding that to our dev dependencies because we're going to make our testing, part of our repo itself. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to create a tests folder here. And what we're going to do is we'll set up our Postman collection, and I'm going to save it and export it in here. And we will have Newman actually read out that collection, that giant JSON dump, and execute its tests from there. So let's go ahead and get over to Postman. And we've got PetMed defined here, where we've had some requests defined to, actually test stuff out. But we don't really have anything tested yet. So we've done a lot of steps with like data validation. We've done all of our queries to get a pet created, get a household created, get a medication created, get a pet medication schedule created. So there are a lot of intricate steps that we have not even tested yet. So this is kind of a very, very, very dire need. All right, so I do need to go ahead and log in. These are some of the test credentials I have in my database, but I just need to log in so that way I have a valid token. Maybe that is not a valid user. Let's see. I'll go ahead and open up Beekeeper just to double check and make sure that I have the right account. Oh, wrong database. I was like, wait a sec. Okay, let's see. I forgot exactly what we were doing with all of these, but I am actually hashing and salting and capable of registering users. Actually, let's go ahead and dump all of these users. And just get a fresh registration from the get-go. So we will provide Hunter2 as the classic testing password, and a randomized name and email as the string here. Now we're going to need to know what those are in order to register. So what we're going to do is we'll use this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful part of Postman's testing setup, where we have scope of what was sent in the request. And so we have access of all of that in our tests. And what we can do is we can set up an environment variable to hold the value of that randomly generated name and email. So this is something I do a lot when I make API tests. It lets me test a variable amount of data and ensures that I can, log in and register with that info as well. So what we will do is come over to the Postman collection itself. we will make a few variables. And then I'll make one called email. I will just leave undefined to start. Name. We'll also do token here. And we've already made sure that all of the verification workflow works. We've tested that out manually. So since it is going to require some manual intervention, like actually clicking it through a link via an email, which would bypass Postman itself, I don't think I'm necessarily going to I don't think I'm necessarily going to define tests for those, because I can't really, test that with the exception of just like testing it live. So what we can do is just like actually make aliased emails, because, I do have to, now that I say all of this, I do have to be able to verify the email or the user account. One thing that we could do, I guess, for testing purposes is I could update the user to be verified by default in the database. And the only reason why I'm having this back and forth with y'all is because I'm enforcing account verification before you can use any features of the site, which kind of makes this part tricky here. For now, I'll go ahead and just use legitimate emails, and actually what I could do is use an alias, and so we can still get a randomized let me do this. I'll throw in a couple random ints. That way I can generate unique emails here that I can still manually verify. Okay, I don't mind that. All right. So I like that I've talked all about testing and we haven't even written any tests whatsoever yet, but let me go ahead and jump to that. So registration, it is our very first step when using the application. That is what we come to first. So what we're going to do is do some very simple tests with Postman's built-in assertion library. And they use like Mocha or Chai. I'm actually not sure who they use under the hood. But it's pretty handy. They even have some snippets here, which I always use because it's really fast to just click one to give you an assertion saying, oh, you're getting a specific status code. Can even validate specific values that get returned, which we are going to be doing with our registration. So here we want this test to validate that we have a 201 indicating that our user account was created as a result of making this post request. Here, let's see, a token is returned in the response. And what I'm going to do is destructure all of our data out first. You don't actually have to destructure it in every callback or remove it out, but I prefer to do it a little more cleanly up here. All right. So we've destructured out the ID and the token, which I believe are the two things that we return. We also return a message string, which we really don't need. The message string is just something we're relaying directly back to our users, so it doesn't really need to necessarily be tested. We know what happened with the context of the status code and with what data is returned, so that's about it. So we are going to assert that we expect token to not be And I was going to say undefined, but I don't like those not assertions. If I can help it, just because we're limiting ourselves to like, it's kind of a bad falsiness check. Like with JavaScript, if you check to see if something's not that value, it catches all falsy conditions. But when we're using the assertion library's like language of to not be something, mentally you might translate that in your head as a, falsiness check, which is great because that catches multiple conditions. But that would explicitly be checking for, null. And so we don't want that. So here I'm going to do like a positive assertion saying we'd expect it to be a string and not undefined. So let's go ahead and run that. And before we do, if the token exists, what we're going to do is we will say Postman dot collection variables dot set our token variable equal to that value. So now if we register, that doesn't happen with registration. We do get a token back from logging in. But we do not get a token. Okay. So what we're going to do is check to see if an ID is returned with the response for the registration, because that actually is something that gets returned when you register. In addition to that, we want to access the request data, which I always forget where that's located. I feel like it's always in a weird place like response.body, but it's part of the request. Like, oh, yeah, pm.request. I don't know why I was glazing over that. All right, let me go ahead and destructure out the email. And the name from there. And we will set those to our collection variables, which will let us do some really cool automatic stuff, which is really, really essential if you're running all of this through Newman using the command line runner, which will basically let you like on queue all of your tests in a specific way. So you can basically just run it once and it simulates, somebody signing up for your app and then logging in and then going to create a household, then creating a pet, then creating some medications and creating some pet medication schedules. So it is really, really handy. All right, but name. And so if we have an email, we will do postman.collectionVariables.set our email variable to that email. If name, postman.collectionVariables.set our name variable. We probably don't need that, but it's easy to set up here. And yeah. So we've got that saved. We'll go pop over here. We'll look at our variables here, all of which are still not defined yet. But watch what happens when we hit the register button here. We get 400 invalid data. Let's see why that is. Also, why did that get returned? Or why did that pass? An ID is returned with a response. We'll debug that in a second, but let's go look at why I had bad data. Let's see. E-password. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Zod. I said that the string must have at least 12 characters for the password. So let's go change that actually. Go to our user schema. We'll go to password. All right, without trying to like relax my standards too much, let me set the minimum of a password to 10. And so now we are actually gonna just change our default password from hunter2 to password 123. Let's double check those characters. That's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. Okay. And then I thought I said that the URL was allowed to be undefined. But in the last video, what I did is I set up these schemas and I hadn't tested out my validation yet. So here we are, image URL, creatable user. So it's checking for a URL format, and I'm allowing it to be undefined. Let me go ahead and explicitly make it optional because, well, so I'm sending it as like a string here. It's got the data type of a string. It's a falsy value, which typically when I validate, I filter out all falsy values unless I'm explicitly looking for something that might have false or 0 as their values. But with the fact that I'm sending this, it's still trying to validate it as a URL format. So let me remove that. All right, 500 forbidden. That is some new info. And I am using my sandbox keys here, so I have to actually not use that aliased email. In production, this wouldn't be an issue for you. But for me, I'm currently just running this on my sandbox keys, so I'll do it to my actually allowed email. There we go. Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to issue that email. It's going to force me to actually check that first in order to truly validate my account. So it did actually send that out. Mailgun just threw an error, I guess. Yeah, because I create the account first in order to get the ID back to ensure it's legitimate, and then I send out the verification email. Which, like, yeah, that's the order it should be done, but it does mean that that account got created. Okay. Well, now this account is created, and it's false by default just because, well, that's what the the workflow of my app I decided should be. Let me go click on that link. Let's see, dragging this back over here. We're clicking my verification link, getting redirected here, and now we have a login token. So that part's still got to be done manually. That will be kind of annoying when setting up registration tests, but once you have validated user accounts, you could set up like test user accounts that have that pre-done. After that point, everything should be nice and easy, but it is kind of a little annoying with just my decision to lock everything in the app behind an authentication wall. All right, but we get both of our tests passing here because we have a 201 status code, and we did get an ID returned. So excellent, we've got that knocked out. And now if we go look at our collection variables again, we will see we should see those variables getting set. And I think body is a property and not a function. Let me log that out nevertheless. Like I said earlier, I always forget how they structure their request body. Okay, yeah. They provide a raw bit of JSON that we have to parse. Okay. Oh, they also do have a toJSON method, but whatever. All right, so let's go ahead and test everything again. That does mean that I do need to delete that user. That way I don't get that constraint failing on that duplicate email. All right, but we did have a successful user registration with that. If we go look at our collection variables again, we should have the name and email done there. Excellent. And I am just going to go ahead and set that user to verified manually here. All right, but once we've done that, we can now make things a little more seamless behind the scenes. So that user's not logged in until they go through the login request. I don't automatically log in users when they register. So here in our actual login request, what about the email? We have to assume this is always going to be a dynamically generated user account for testing purposes. Well, we don't want to use the same hard-coded one because we want to ensure that we are testing with new credentials each time. And so we can actually use our collection variables inside of our requests themselves. And this is what all of that collection variable setup was for. So here I can say the email is my collection level email variable. And and if you hover over it too, I don't know why its syntax highlighting wasn't going off on it earlier, but it's a lighter orange now versus the red that you typically see with their variables. If you hover over it, it says the scope of it is the collection variable called email, and it shows the current value as well. So now when you're testing everything out, you can register a user, set them to verified, and doesn't matter what their email was. I mean, in production, once you do have a randomly generated username here, once you're using your production mailgun keys, that is, then that randomly generated email doesn't matter, it's stored here. You can do the same thing for your password. You can generate a random password, so it's not just password 123 in your test data. But there we go. We have a login request working here. So what we're going to do is validate that we get a 200 and validate that we get a token out of the response itself. So we'll go ahead and destructure the token out. We'll leave the 200 status code check in here. I pretty much always leave that one in. You can also do a check here for time to make sure that all of your responses are happening at, in a timely manner. I probably would not do those on your authentication ones just because you're oftentimes deliberately slowing them down. Like with your salting and hashing, algorithm, you're going to be deliberately inducing a delay to prevent brute forcing. So I won't do that for this specifically because that did take a little over 200 milliseconds, but that's through design. All right. So this is just going to validate that we get a string back for the token. If we wanted to, we could do some like custom JavaScript doing some string splitting to see if we've got the correct like headers, payload. And we can't like verify the signature, but we could do some like base 64 work just to see if the contents in the header make sense. But for now, I'm just going to validate that this is a string getting returned. So in the event that we do have the token now, this makes your life a million times easier when you're doing any sort of project that's dealing with auth with Postman. Whenever you've worked with Postman, if you've had to manually add your authorization for everything, by default, it's always said inherit auth by a parent. You may have set it up on your own manually, request by request, but that's kind of annoying. Well, looking at what inherit auth from parent actually means is it means this is deriving it from its parent element, which is the pets folder. The auth setting for the pets folder is deriving it from its parent, which is the API folder, and so on and so forth, all the way up until PetMed. Now, what we can do is we can set up a global single source of truth for what our authentication should be. So we can actually here save our token to a collection variable and use it in this authorization setting. And that means that if we just run the login request, everything in the PetMed folder, if it is just using inherent auth by parent, by design of that, everything is authenticated. So it makes your life so much easier. And all we have to do for that is use our token variable here. And so now every request is behind this auth wall. And so formerly we tested this out with before I put our auth middleware on our entire API. So if we go look at that setup, if we go to our routes, if we go to our API router, well, actually, I might not have placed that anywhere yet. I may have explicitly disabled it now that I say that, but we have this token check middleware here that basically just validates, do you have the correct credentials? And if so, it extracts them out and injects them into the rec.user for convenience's sake. But I honestly don't think I've placed that anywhere. Oh, not find and replace. Whoops. Yeah, so the token check middleware is only being applied in a check token route. Okay, so I actually never had it applying on the API itself. So now, there we go. Every singular API request now has to have a valid token assigned by my server. And so if I were to attempt to make a post request to upload a photo, which I thought I was. Let's see. All right. So this is now behind an API wall. I don't have to worry about any of that. I don't have to update every one of my Postman routes individually just because they're inheriting that auth. So because I clicked that login button a few minutes ago, if I run this, missing auth headers. Ah, crud. Let's see. Let me go double check that. API pets. And I mean, it specifically said missing authentication headers, which is weird. That would be out of all of the auth errors I would expect it to have. Though it's not showing that here. It's using bearer token from... Oh, I'm an idiot. Okay, actually, the code I wrote to login, when I logged in initially, did not save that variable yet. I then wrote this line of code, tabbed away. Okay, so now we've got that. We look over here, we do have that variable. Now I can actually upload a picture of my late cat, Mishka. And then Molter did not like what I uploaded to it. Let's see. What was the key of the file? I think upload. There we go. And just dragging it over. There she is. She was a big ol' mooch. But it uploaded successfully. Excellent. So yeah, we got to see the auth wall in place. So we've got just a couple tests in place, and as I'm going to be adding in my, API routes here and writing, Postman requests for all of them, I'm going to be writing tests in conjunction. And all of that's going to be very boring and very long. And this has already been very long as is. So I really am not going to subject you to that several hour video of torture that it could potentially be. So what we will do is we will go right click, export, collection version 2.1. I don't really know what the difference between V2 and V2.1 is. And I forgot that using the Postman app image for some reason screws with like Linux fonts, or it doesn't load them correctly. So pretty sure this is my home directory. And I try to type like it's not going to go to the right spot. So I can type and it like will find the right spot, it just doesn't like render the character. So I'm pretty sure that's source. Pretty sure that's PetMed that we've navigated ourselves to. And this is a directory, judging by the metadata column here, that looks like it is 5 characters long. So I'm going to guess that's tests. Yes. Okay. And I'm naming this collection.json, and we'll see. It says down here it was exported successfully. We will actually see if that did or not. And it did. Cool. Okay. So the Postman test runner, it's not going to do well with image uploading probably. I'm wondering if you can write like a curl request that pipes through Postman. Oh well. But yeah, in order to see this in progress, let's go ahead and run Newman. And so what we will do is I will make in our package.json a test API script that says Newman tests collection.json. And I'm going to rename it to tests, actually. Oh, it should be Newman run. Let's see. So we got a token back, but not the right status code. Oh, it's because yeah, so this is the annoying part that I said. Would be a pain. Let's see. So I can rename that email out of the way and try to register a new user, but that new user is going to have a failing test just because they can't log in yet. So let's go ahead and run through that so you can see what the workflow would be like with Newman. And we can kind of see a high level overview here. You know, we can't get a token because, I mean, we can't log in, so that's going to fail. That's I don't know why. Those two assertions are passing. That's weird. All right, but here we can actually test the register one. So I don't know. I think this is more of a logistical thing, like issue for me than like you setting this up for production or for a similar app. The unfortunate thing with Newman is I don't think it allows you to discriminate running requests, which is kind of the whole crux of the issue here. With Postman, we can actually just manually drag a collection in and test out pretty much everything that we want, and we can omit what we don't want. And so for that, what we could do here is choose to not do the upload and choose to not do the registration until I kind of feel better what I want to do in that situation. But here, we can do the login and then the token check request here, which does let us validate that our token came back correctly. And then 403. 403? Oh, I'm 403ing because this is my only user, so it's like, hey, I can't find that user. Damn. So this is what I get for doing way too much stuff manually. Or wait. There we go. All right, so I should expect to get a 403 in that situation because that account isn't verified. So thank you, Postman. Before we run this again, I should be able to log in, and then my token check here, we can slap in a test for that. Here, it's actually got a token hard-coded, which is an older one from a few days ago when I last worked on it. So we're actually going to get rid of that and move it back over to inherit auth from parent. So it's always using the most up-to-date credentials. And then we'll go ahead and destructure out. Forget what exactly it returns. Let's go take a look at it, however. A smiley face as a message. Okay. So for now, we'll assert that the message equals a happy face. There we go. And that lets us know that we were able to log in successfully and have our token validated. So looking at our collection runner, we still have just these two with tests written and defined, but that does give us 4 tests to look at and validate that our API worked. So now, I haven't used their new CLI tool, but it looks like it just grabs your collection from the Postman cloud and uses your API key to run it there. Oh, that'd be kind of annoying, but if you do have a decent CI setup, if you got your own CI/CD workflow going, you could take that. Oh wait, they have a section here down on that. You could take this and that would allow you to filter out ones selectively. So I guess that makes sense, and that's a little more helpful than just like running Newman all by itself. But yeah, so this probably isn't the best project for me to try to show you setting up your tests with. And in fact, there are a ton of videos I have on our channel if you just search for Postman on videos using Postman to set up automated variables, automated tests, etc. That would be a much better example and reference to look to. But Yeah, so I mean, right now, Postman by default is going to run everything in the order it's stored. So unless there's a command line argument for Newman that allows you to selectively omit ones, I think me looking into a possible potential alternate would be the better solution. But anyway, it's basically just going to be a lot of this. Every single, request that I want to test out, I'm going to have to, write some of these tests here. And then since this is not natively part of your development environment, you have to be sure that you are good at exporting and updating it and keeping it part of your, repo. So that way it's checked in. But yeah, so probably one of the most boring videos that I think this series will have, but I did want to show kind of a general overview of what the process is going to be like of setting up those tests and then adding them into your testing workflow in some kind of manner. Anyway, I can't even know if I can say I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got through this. And if you did, thank you, and I will see you in the next much more engaging and thrilling videos. Until then, be well.